Welcome to this new podcast by Galaxy Moth Press. I am your host, M. You can also call me Moth. My pronouns are they, them. And I am a writer and a publisher of primarily trans sapphic books, bringing you interviews and more with other queer writers and readers. And this is our inaugural episode. So, welcome. Thanks for listening. And I have with me today the author Luke McQuillan. Luke is best known for the role of Angela on Cartoon Network's The Amazing World of Gumball. Luke also guest starred on the Netflix original animated series Farzar, playing multiple roles. Luke's work online as an impressionist and musician has amassed him over 20,000 followers across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Luke's videos have also garnered the attention of industry professionals like Sophie B. Hawkins and Lady Gaga. Luke graduated with high honors with a degree in theater. Upon graduating, Luke won his college's top award in the arts for an original musical he wrote and directed. Welcome, Luke. Would you like to add anything to the bio?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Well, not to brag, I guess I need to update that bio. I'm over 30,000 followers now across all my different platforms. If any of my followers are listening, thank you so much for all the support. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Em, for having me.
Yes, well, it is my pleasure to have you join us. And, you have quite an amazing amount of creative output across music and voice acting. And today we are specifically going to be talking about your book, Love in the Light. And so I just wanted to share with our listeners a little bit about this book. It has been in the top 10 of musical books on Amazon, and also holding steady in LGBTQ plus historical fiction. Currently, as of this recording, is number 32 for the paperback. And it's also available as an ebook. So, okay, in this book, it's 1939, and Alfred Hearn navigates ships for a living. He struggles to navigate his own dreams. His true desires are at odds with society, and he pushes them down. A new job offer gives him a fresh start, but there's a catch. He has to live in a crumbling lighthouse with a moody keeper. The young lighthouse keeper, James Spencer, has no interest in having a roommate. His books and records are company enough. But Alfred is unlike any other young man he's ever met, and sparks begin to fly. A remote lighthouse could be the perfect harbor for a forbidden romance to flourish, if only the shipping company they both work for didn't have other plans for it. If they lose the safety of the lighthouse, what would it mean for their blossoming relationship? With James by his side, Alfred must finally face navigating the rockiest sea of all, his own life. And I can tell you that this is just a delight to read. So I highly recommend it to our listeners if you have not read it yet. And so, Luke, okay, I am not a small talk person. Being autistic is not one of my skills. I joke that I am a big talk person, so that's what we're going to get on this show.
Nice.
So let's dive in with just a really easy question. Why why male romance set in 1939?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind words about the book. And I also should disclose that I am autistic as well. So I appreciate the big talk. And I love that. I love that term. Um, well, male because I am gay. And technically, if you want to get down to brass tacks, I'm demisexual. And there is some demi representation in the book. We can get to that later. Um, and then 1939, this is a very autistic answer, but I knew that I wanted to do a period gay romance, but what I didn't know the year but then learned that 1939 was a really pivotal year for lighthouses. And so, because the book is set in a lighthouse, I was like, oh, this could provide some really interesting conflict that I could work into the story, that this is something the two guys have to navigate. And I also thought that this kind of echoed a lot of what we're going through right now, both with obviously 1939 is the tail end of the Great Depression. Things were starting to change, but there was still a lot of economic hardship and uncertainty. And then as far as the lighthouse industry, there were changes happening with automation and the fact that the Coast Guard was taking over all the lighthouses in America. The lighthouses were um, kept by a couple of different services. There was something literally called the Lighthouse Service, and there's another one that's escaping my memory. And those were dissolved. One of them was actually a branch of the armed forces, I believe, and similar to how the Coast Guard is. And those were dissolved, and the Coast Guard took over the remaining lighthouses and automated a large number of them when they did that. And so, obviously, with what we're going through with AI and automation, I thought that was a really interesting parallel that this is literally something that has affected jobs and affected humans. Well, if you go back into the 1800s and actually talk about the Luddites and the weaving industry and all of that, it's automation is something that's been with us for, well over 100 years. So that's why 1939. Sorry for the very meandering, long-winded response.
No, no, not at all. That's awesome. It's not a period of time that I'm really familiar with beyond, the big US history and world history points. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's really fascinating. And what about the romance aspect? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and these characters, Alfred and James?
Sure. Well, Alfred knows that he's gay and is suppressing it. He had not a boyfriend, but maybe a best friend. I kind of leave it open to interpretation. There was a guy in his life that he was definitely in love with, and that relationship was not reciprocated. And so he is thinking to himself, and he goes into this in the opening number, which is called The Way to Myself. And he is basically convinced himself, or more resigning himself to the fact that he's not going to be able to have um, a relationship the way that he wants to. And that's for so many reasons. I mean, it's still hard now, but in 1939, it was literally illegal. And so he's trying to basically convince himself to leave that part of himself behind, and he's wrestling with that in the song. And and then James does not just hadn't thought about it, just had never met the right person. And that's where I talk about well, it's not, I don't use the term demisexual in the book because obviously that term didn't exist at the time. But I really wrote James from that angle that he may have thought he was asexual if that had been a term at the time. But more likely, he just, didn't think, just thought he was weird, thought that he didn't experience those feelings. And that is touched on in a song as well called Riptide. And so he meets Alfred, and there's this spark and there's this connection that is a deeper connection than he's ever experienced. And, I'm sure your listeners will know, but just to recap, because some people, I've met a lot of people that I say I'm demisexual and they don't know what it is. The demisexual mechanism, that's kind of what I refer to it as, is that you are asexual until you meet somebody that you have a deep spiritual connection with. And so this isn't an orientation that is very quick. Obviously, this is usually somebody that you have to be friends with for a long time, or that you have to have known even for, months or years, um, to develop a spark with, and then that awakens your sexuality. And and that is my experience with sexuality as well. And so I wanted to give some representation to that in a book because I haven't seen it, especially for, a gay male. I have not seen any demi representation. I'm sure it's out there, because there's thousands, millions of books published every year. But so with James, it's kind of this big surprise that, like, oh, I do have these feelings. I can experience love and desire, and that's something that is kind of a wonderful surprise. But then also he realizes it's 1939. This is illegal. What am I going to do? Um, and so they both have to wrestle with that throughout the book.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you mentioned during that a song, and so
Hmm.
we haven't talked about that yet. Although we're only on our third question, so um,
Sorry.
but that's me uh, just saying I should have put this in the intro for the book. But
Oh no, that's okay.
your book is amazing in for many reasons, and one of them being that it has this sort of magical realism quality where the characters break into song during the book. And as you're reading it, you get the lyrics to the song, and there's also a QR code so that you can listen to a fully produced song that is being sung by the character. And so, that's a really amazing feature. And I'm just curious how that kind of um, works with the character development. If you could just tell us a little bit more about the way the songs and the characters go together.
Sure, and thank you so much for that. I approach musical theater, and I've got a degree in theater, and I wrote musicals for my degree. That script writing was my main focus, and I took 4 years of music theory and the whole nine yards, and I know how to notate and transcribe, all that. I didn't do that for this project because it's a little I'm a little rusty in that area. Um, but I approach musical theater as, especially for a solo, almost like a soliloquy. So the other part of my theater degree was Shakespeare. I took probably 3 or 4 Shakespeare courses. I was in a Shakespearean class, and the soliloquies really are this beautiful feature of Shakespeare through verse, where the character breaks the fourth wall and is letting you into their innermost desires and or their thought process as they're wrestling with something. And the soliloquies really function almost like songs in a Shakespearean play. And I think the best musicals, there's a combination of exposition happening in the songs, but also those soliloquy moments where you're getting this very heartfelt inner dialogue of a character that cannot be expressed through regular prose. And that was also the key with Shakespeare. That's why the soliloquies existed. And so I was trying to approach it that way, especially with the opening number, The Way to Myself, that there's this very deep inner turmoil that he's wrestling with through song, trying to navigate, which that's funny because he's a navigator. But um, so I was really trying to use the songs to let you into the character's emotions, and then there are other songs that are moving the story along because I didn't want. I've watched musicals, and having a theater degree, you come across a lot of different kinds of musical theater, and sometimes the songs are just supposed to be fun, and they're very lightly involved with the plot or very lightly involved with the inner workings of a character, and I don't find that work nearly as compelling. And so I wanted to do something with the songs where they really are vital to the story, and it's not just something that's like a gimmick, but something that you are learning about these characters. They're experiencing growth through the music, they're falling in love through the music. And then there are still some fun moments. There's like a patter song for the villain and his secretary. There's another wonderful villain song at the end, that's a lot of fun. And I was, borrowing from different musical theater structures, from everything from old Broadway like Cole Porter to going into like the Disney musicals like the Sherman Brothers and animated musicals, things like that. So I was playing with all those different types of structures and then combining that with my other favorite medium, which is of course books.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank
I
you.
love that piece about the Shakespearean element, and that kind of opportunity to get. It's interesting because in a book you already have some interiority
Mhm.
with the characters, and yet this gives just a deeper, different way to do that, and so that's really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, so I would love to hear, we've touched on a lot of pieces that I think play into this, but if you had more to say about some of your inspirations behind writing this and just wanted to comment in general on some writing inspirations.
Sure, absolutely. Well, getting back to the autism, um, lighthouses have been a special interest of mine since childhood, and I used to go to the library and check out. There was the public library in Jacksonville, Illinois, um, and check out this old book on lighthouses that was published for kids, and it was probably from the 1940s or 1950s, and it had all these great ink sketches of lighthouses and the inner workings and all the different mechanisms and information about the Fresnel lenses, and I just was so fascinated by lighthouses. And like any autistic special interest, it can be born out of something very mundane or something very minor. This was born out of the Disney film Pete's Dragon, and specifically the scene where, well, I mean, the whole movie is set in a lighthouse. But there's this wonderful scene where Helen Reddy is on the balcony of the lighthouse just singing her heart out. Her love is lost at sea, or so they believe. And she sings Candle on the Water, which was nominated for an Oscar. I don't know that it won, but should have. And that was just this seminal moment of cinema for me as a kid, that I was just um, spellbound by this scene, and the light is revolving behind her and casting all this really cool backlight effect um, on her as she's singing, and it's at night, of course, and very dramatic. And I just thought it was such a beautiful scene, and that really is one of the things that um, began my love of lighthouses and that special interest. And and also, ironically, that movie is a musical, so that is one of those musicals I grew up watching and grew up loving. And I definitely have to confess that the Disney musicals are a huge influence on me. And while this book is adult and for adults, um, I did have a beta reader tell me that they thought the overture specifically sounded like it was out of the Disney parks and things like that. And I love that comparison, that people are hearing that, and hearing that inspiration come through. And as far as other inspirations, I did mention Cole Porter. I was in a Cole Porter show in high school. I played Billy in Anything Goes. And I was definitely looking at not so much the chord progressions or the melodies. Those I really wanted a more modern sensibility, and very catchy. I love catchy music, and I wanted the songs to get stuck in people's heads. But I was specifically looking at the orchestration and the percussion from those Cole Porter shows. I wanted it to sound somewhat authentic to the 1930s. I did actually track down the original Broadway cast recording from, I think it was from the 20s or 30s, of Anything Goes, and was listening to that. And it has a very the band must have been very small and the drums are kind of very far back in the mix. And I knew I wanted it a little punchier, but I was trying to go for, especially there's this great walking bass line that's inspired by Cole Porter. The drum beat is inspired by Cole Porter, specifically songs like Anything Goes and Blow Gabriel Blow from that same show. And so, because I wanted some authenticity to the time as well, while making it enjoyable for a modern listening audience too.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about ways that you've made it authentic to the time, there are so many pieces in there that you definitely can feel transported back to 1939, even if you're
Yay.
not super familiar with it. And, I just, uh, some of the choices that you made were really interesting. And there's a scene that takes place in a theater, for example. And so, how did you, as you were working on this, let's go into a little bit of like writer craft talk.
Sure.
As you were working on this, do you recall like how you chose certain pieces from that time period? Um, kind of like what, maybe how or why you chose things like the theater and stuff like that.
Well, I wanted them to go on a secret clandestine date, and I was thinking to myself, what could they do? What could they get away with? It would be very difficult for them to have gone to a sit-down restaurant and be visible, in front of everybody. And I thought to myself, well, when the movie theater lights dim, they could sneak in, or maybe they could even sneak in separately, which is what I ended up doing. Um, and that way they could probably sneak into a movie and not like they paid, but sneak in separately.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, yeah, that's the autistic in me. Um,
Be gay,
and
do crime, but not actual crime.
right. Well, in this case, the being gay was being the crime or
I
doing the
I
crime.
I know, I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And so I thought that was just really fun, and I love like little surreptitious things like that, where characters are sneaking around, and there's some excitement and some thrill and a little bit of danger. Um, and I wanted that in the book. And also the book is mainly a cozy. It's set in a lighthouse. It's basically in the same location throughout most of the book. And so I did want and that scene happens about halfway through, or maybe like a third to halfway through. And so I wanted a change of scenery, change of pace. And so that really fulfilled both of those requirements. And then I also just thought the movie theater would be such a good opportunity for them to see straight couples and for them to have this realization that, oh crap, we can't hold hands like that couple is. I can't put my arm around him like that older couple is. And so there's this moment where they're really kind of having this realization and being a little crestfallen as a result, um, that we really don't have the same privileges that all these straight couples going to the movies do around us. And I think that's something that still happens. I relate to that. I wrote it for, to be maybe a little more extreme because it's 1939, but I absolutely relate to that still. There's times where I don't want to hold my husband's hand in public, or I have to look around to see, if there's somebody that looks like they're going to hate crime me, and it's horrible that we have to live like that and that we have to think those things. But it's a reality for queer people, and it was a reality then, and it's a reality now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great point. And I think about, I will spend time with my friends going to antique malls in we'll go all over uh, St. Louis, parts of Illinois, and visit antique malls. And when I'm in there, I'm looking around and I'm like, there's nothing gay in this like there's nothing in this antique mall that says gay people ever existed in the past.
Yes.
And I've had some like sort of strange, almost out of body moments where it's just like all of these photos and paintings of, straight couples and their kids. And it's just, and little statues of straight couples and
Hmm.
wedding photos and books. And, it's very disconcerting. It's really, um, you know, like I'm not there because I'm looking for stuff with people in it. I'm there because I'm, looking for like an interesting knickknack.
Right.
um, but it is such just, those kind of experiences are still there, and that element of the past is still very much present
Oh,
for us.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
it's funny. I've had the same exact experience at antique malls.
Oh no.
And one of the reasons, we talked about why 1939 with the lighthouse stuff, but the larger answer to the question of why a period piece is really that we were there. And there's so many people that want to believe that we're not, and that being gay or being queer or transgender or any of these things that are something that did not exist in the past, and that this is some kind of new vast conspiracy. And
Mhm.
it's just not true. And so, in writing this books, in writing this book for 1939, I was specifically thinking of that. I'm like, I am trying to write the record in a sense and create something in the past that we can look back and see ourselves in the past. Because I think it's really important for queer people to be able to look in the past and see themselves reflected because we were there. And the other thing I was thinking of, they are of the age that, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. When I was in high school in 2004, Massachusetts was the first state to pass gay marriage. And I remember being so touched that some of the first couples that wed were in their 80s and in their 70s. And these were couples that had been together for 50, 60 years and were finally getting legal recognition of their marriage. And if you do the math for my two guys in Love and the Light, they absolutely could have lived to that 2004 and gotten married, and had that lifelong love, that lifelong relationship. And so, there were many inspirations for why I said it in the past, but it was to contradict that, we weren't there, thing that happens. And it was also to create a fictional story of some of those older New England couples that got married in 2004 that would really have stuck with me all these years about reading their stories. And, I think that the, um, the need to see ourselves in the past is something that we don't think about, but it's so grounding.
Mm, absolutely. That's so beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
with 1939, of course, also thinking about the rise of World War II and the Nazi regime. And in the 30s, there was that one of the first groups that the Nazis persecuted, like their first book burning, was a gender and sexuality clinic where people had been treated for gender confirmation, where there was a study of sexuality. And that was in my mind, while I was reading this, like thinking about that time period and just the dangers of, I mean, the US for sure, and the dangers of what was going on in Europe, and gay people being put in camps. And it also, it not to, I don't know if this might feel like a weird segue, but also at the same time, there was a lot in the in German research about what would uh, become known as autism, and autistic people were also a part of that being identified and being othered and put in camps. And I noticed reading this that there's neurodivergent autistic coding going
Oh yes.
on, and but so say more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think when you are an autistic writer, it's hard not to write autistic characters. I will say that. And
This is true because this happened to me. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I had a book that I wrote the first draft of before my autism diagnosis,
mhm,
and it's the Poison Fruits, the book that I recently published.
which is
And
amazing. Everybody needs to read it.
oh, thank you. um, but as I was revising the draft, like a decade later, I realized this character is autistic,
Yeah.
and but I didn't know when I was writing it I was autistic, and so anyway, it ends up being used in the book, but it's a contemporary story, so that character can know that she is autistic, and it's a defined term. So anyway, back to you and your autistic characterization.
Yes. Well, James is autistic. I mean, I can just say that as the author. And I did that intentionally. I wanted some representation. The only reason I didn't say it in on the page is because, as you said, the diagnosis was still evolving. It's not something he would have been diagnosed with in 1939. And so, ironically, my autism prevented me from using the term because I was like, it's not historically accurate. But he absolutely is, and that is also part of the relationship and how it develops because I was really trying to, and this maybe segue into a larger thing, but with this relationship, how I wrote it, I was really trying to glamorize radical acceptance and not toxic codependency. And so there's so many books where these same exact two characters would have had some kind of transformation in order to be loved. So Alfred is really nervous, anxious, he's really tall and skinny, he doesn't know what he wants with life, and maybe in like a Hollywood version of this that he would have to have some kind of body transformation and become, and that's where he gains his confidence. And I just totally reject that premise. And I also wanted some, it's a whole thing in the gay male community of body standards that are unrealistic and very unhealthy, and it leads a lot of gay men to eating disorders and to working out and working themselves to death or taking substances to change their body, and it's really dangerous, toxic part of gay culture. And so I wanted to write a character who was skinny and remains skinny throughout the whole book. And I have dealt with that my whole life too. I have always been on the very, very skinny side. And then with James, um Alfred accepts him. He accepts the way his brain works. He does have moments where he's fascinated by his brain, and he has a journey with that, and learning how James' brain works. But neither one of them has to change in order to be loved. And that's what I mean by radical acceptance, that they really accept and love each other. And that includes the autistic parts of James. And in writing that and giving some representation to um, autism, I just thought that that was really important right now, especially. And again, I can't take full credit because I think that it's hard to not write autistic characters. I think maybe even Alfred um, shows some autistic traits. I'd be interested for your opinion on that. But yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
yes, I did definitely think that they were both autistic.
Yeah.
And so when you really honed in on James, I was I kept thinking like, well, what about Alfred? So
Yeah. No, they both definitely could be.
yeah, yeah, well, I know that we have a set amount of time for recording, so I'm going to go ahead and get to our closing questions, and then I will have to have you back on to do an episode about author marketing because we did not get to touch on your TikTok and online media presence. So we'll have to do that in another episode. So stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah, I would
Um,
love that.
but that would probably fit better in a different episode, I think. Anyway, okay. So here's my kind of culminating question for us. So you have all this wonderful background in voice work, audio narration, impressions, and music. So I think the obvious question is, will we get an audiobook of Love and the Light?
Yes, we will. And thank you for the question. That is my number one request in all of my TikTok videos. I get questions about that. Some of them have dozens and dozens of likes and upvotes. Well, I think of the likes upvoting them. They don't have that on TikTok, but um, and I from the very beginning, I knew that I wanted an audiobook, and I actually recorded the demos with narration. Um, and I ended up taking that out because I thought that if people wanted to just enjoy the songs on their own, that maybe the narration would be a distraction. But yeah, it will be built in seamlessly. The songs will just be part of each chapter's audio file that they are part of. And I know that uh, in my audiobook work that I've done for other authors that um, Audible has a lot of rules about how you use music. So I'm very hopeful that um, they will accept this. And if not, I will just have to market it and sell it independently. And I've already looked into some ways to do that to make sure that I can still put it out. And I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to put it on Audible as well.
Yeah, wonderful. And I follow quite a few trans and queer authors who put their audiobooks on itch.io or itch.io, depending on
Mm,
your internet
mhm.
lingo.
Yeah.
And that's a great spot for audio as well. So, all right, well, Luke, thank you for being the first guest on the first episode of the Galaxy Moth podcast. And why don't you let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your book, and any other closing thoughts you might have?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast, and I would absolutely love to come back on. And the best place to find me, which will have links to everywhere else, is my website, and that's www.lukemcquillan.com, and that's LUKEMCQUILLAN.com. And I am on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Blue Sky, YouTube. Trying to think what else I'm on. Uh, I'm on everything but X, and we won't talk about that for obvious
Yeah, I'm
reasons.
not on there either.
And
And I was original. I joined Twitter like almost right after it started because of Felicia
I
Day,
know, me too.
and and
Not because of Felicia Day, but yeah, I love Felicia Day. I wish they'd bring back the guild, but yeah, I've been on there too, or was on there from the beginning.
Yeah, I deleted mine a while back. So, well, thank you. And I will put in the show notes where to find Luke online and to find his book. And thank you again for joining us. And I will look forward to chatting with Luke again and chatting with upcoming author and reader guests. So, thank you for listening.